Hey everyone, it's Jason. On today's episode of The Thermostat with Jason Barger, I'm joined by Margaret C. Andrews, a seasoned executive and professor at Harvard University of a variety of leadership courses and professional and executive programs. In this fun and engaging chat together, we dive into observations about the low levels of employee engagement and trust that many people are experiencing in organizations today, and the role that emotional intelligence plays in helping us co-create cultures that bring out the best in ourselves and others. It turns out, awareness and intentionality are as important as ever. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. Wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today, welcome in. So glad you are here. We're in season 9 of the podcast, which is hard to believe that we have over 300 episodes now. So glad that this continues to grow and spread in so many great ways. If you've been with us from the very beginning of this thing, then so glad that you continue. This continues to add value to your life and your work, and this continues to be a place that shows up in a good way for you. If you're new to the podcast, welcome in. All I'm asking of you is that every time we try to record one of these, I want this to be a time in your life, a chance for you to step back, for you hopefully to have some good oxygen breathed into you and some time to think about the temperature that you're trying to set in your life and in your work. And that's my commitment to you every time we sit down to do one of these. If you'll do me the quick favor, I keep being reminded of this, of course, if you're to rate the podcast 5 stars, of course, on whatever platform you're on, leave an authentic review, your own words. But why do conversations like we're going to have today, topics like we're going to talk about today, why are they relevant and important in the world today? Your own words. And obviously, every time you share the podcast with somebody, that helps amplify these messages even further. So thanks everybody for being here. So excited. And thank you for helping to amplify these messages. I'm very excited to invite my guest in just a moment to the chat. Margaret C. Andrews is a seasoned executive, academic leader, speaker, and instructor. She has created and teaches a variety of leadership courses and professional and executive programs at Harvard University, and is the founder of the Milo Center, a private leadership development firm. Her clients include Amazon, Citi, Continental, Walmart, Wayfair, and the United Nations. She lives in Brookline, Massachusetts. You can follow Margaret on LinkedIn, Margaret C. Andrews. I've recently been introduced to Margaret and her work and excited to have her into the pod today. So Margaret, welcome in.
Thank you so much. It's very nice to be here.
I'm glad to have you. And since you are new to certainly my listeners, but then also you and I are still getting to know each other, give us something that we wouldn't know about you as we begin our great chat we're going to have today.
Okay. I'm a swimmer. How about that? I like to swim.
You like to swim? What, daily you're a swimmer, like in the pool at a certain time and like... Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't say daily, but I do it, 3 to 4 times a week. I'm part of a master's swim team. So, get up and I'm in the pool by 6 o'clock and working out. And I've more recently started doing more open water swimming. So lakes and rivers and the ocean and things like that. So it's kind of a nice thing. And I even go out and swim in Walden Pond, which is absolutely magical.
Look at that. You are at home. You were saying earlier that, you're at home where you are. So that's pretty wonderful. This podcast is called The Thermostat with Jason Barger. And the reason it's called that, of course, is for the listeners out there, one of the books that I wrote is called Thermostat Cultures and is about how leaders and teams and organizations proactively shape the culture they want. What is that temperature that you personally or you collectively are aiming to set? And rather than just expecting it to just magically happen. What is it that we want to create together? I'm interested. What is if you had to articulate kind of where you are in life right now, what's the temperature that in your life, like, how do you describe what the temperature you aim to set in your life and in your work? Like, is there a way that you would describe that for yourself?
Yeah, I guess I don't always think of it as a temperature. I think of it as maybe it's very analogous, but I call it the excitement meter.
Okay.
Right. There are things that get you excited, right? And the meter goes up, and there are things that kind of drain you and go the other way. So I'm pretty fortunate right now that the excitement meter is very high. I get to teach a lot of different variety of classes and programs, and I really like that. I really like helping people get to where they want to go.
Yeah, I love it. Well, tell us a little bit more about your work at Harvard, and also any kind of trends that you're seeing in the workforce, or like how the work that you're doing relates to what you're seeing, trends that are happening in the workplace today.
Yeah. So my work at Harvard. So, I've been in the higher ed space, I guess, since a little before 2000. So I was the executive director of the MBA program at MIT Sloan. And so that's where I kind of got into higher education. And I kind of got there through a series of wonderfully lucky accidents. And I was very happy with that. So I did that for about 7 years. And long story short, and then I moved over to Harvard. So I was associate dean for management programs there in the Division of Continuing Education. And that's where I really started teaching more. And I created a class called Managing Yourself and Leading Others, and one called Leading with Emotional Intelligence and Strategic Leadership and Creativity and Innovation. And so I consider them all facets of each other. You know, that people think of strategy as so different from leadership. And I'm like, no, if you don't have one, you can't have the other. Right. And the same thing with creativity and innovation. Innovation is part of strategy and is also part of leadership. So, they're just different facets of it. And so, one of the things I really like is that all of my classes and executive programs are the word I want to use is conversational. They're very participative. We do activities and we debrief them and we say, well, what'd you think about that? And people ask questions. And so, I get to hear what's on people's minds and what they're struggling with. And what I absolutely love is when somebody, raises a question and you can just see everybody lean in like, yeah, I want to know the answer to that too. Yeah. But, a lot of times what I tell them is that, there really isn't a single right answer to any of these questions. It depends on so many different things that, it depends on the context, and which is huge, right? It's, what company are you in? What industry are you in? How long has this problem been going on? What have you tried before? All of these different things. What do you want? But I do hear more questions coming up around emotional intelligence, empathy, also, diversity in the workplace, a lot of it around the generations, what do I do? And then, of course, how is AI going to change all of this? And the answer to that last one is, I don't know. And anyone who tells you they do, I don't think they know what they're talking about. So, it could go a million different ways, right? So there's lots of predictions out there, but really, we don't know yet. We're running lots of experiments and we're going to learn a lot.
Yeah. Well, I want to pick up on a number of those that you just named, but, I'm sure, as employee engagement, just, some research that just came out just a few weeks ago saying that we've hit a 10-year low in that. You've also probably seen some of the statistics that Gallup has put out recently talking about only 23% of employees feel like they trust their leaders and the future direction that their organization is going. Only 20% of employees say that they feel connected to their organizational culture, and yet 90% of them say that's exactly what I want. And so we're living in this very low trusting environment with not only leaders, but also in the direction and people feeling disengaged and not connected to that culture. And so, those things that you've named, you pull up any article in the world right now, and you're going to see things like, well, you better have a great culture, and yet we don't always do a great job of defining what that means, and you'll see we need to raise the level of our emotional intelligence, and we really need to connect with people in that side of empathy and build levels of trust with people, because the levels of trust are so low. You talk about being a culture maker, not a culture taker. I'm interested in that kind of distinction that you make, and then I want to build off some of those themes.
Yeah. So the way I talk about it, I base a lot of my work on the writing on the work of Edgar Schein from MIT, who was really one of the first people that started talking about culture in organizations, as opposed to a culture of some group somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that is hard to do is to change a culture. And so I distinguish between culture takers and culture makers. So what I say is that the vast majority of us are culture takers. We join an organization, and I'm talking, by the way, I should say, about larger organizations here, right?
Yep.
This becomes less true the smaller the organization is, but lots of people work in big organizations. So most of us, in fact, the vast majority of us are culture takers. So we join an organization and we are joining that culture. And so we will be assimilating into that, right? So if they're very formal, we will learn to be very formal. And if they're very chill, we will learn to tamp it down a little bit, right? And culture makers are those that have the ability to change the culture. And by that, I mean, generally, we're talking about the CEO, because the CEO is the chief culture officer, and they have the ability to really change the culture. So, of course, there are subcultures. The marketing group has a culture, and the engineering team, etc. So there are definitely subcultures, but most of us are culture takers. So it's important to understand what a culture is if you're thinking about joining it. Because the likelihood that you yourself, unless you are the CEO, are going to change it is actually very small. And by the way, even if you're the CEO, it's not guaranteed, because not only do you have to believe it, you have to model it, you have to change structures and processes. Who you hire, how you hire them, how you develop them, what types of behaviors you tolerate versus don't tolerate. And all of these things, right? So who has access to all those levers? The CEO, right? Most of us don't. So that's what I distinguish. And I want to be really clear, because a few times people have misunderstood what I was saying. One person said, "Oh, I get it. Okay, that means that culture takers are just kind of lazy." Like, no, that's not it at all, right? Because one example of this is if you work in an organization that has the stacked ranking, right, where you have to, you have 10 people in your group, you have to, 1 to 10, and then they get rid of the bottom 10% every year. Guess what? You're just not going to have a lot of cooperation in that organization, because if I help you, it only hurts me in those situations, right? Because we're not measuring how we do, we're measuring how you do and how I do. And so, right, if even if you want to, have a very trusting culture, it's going to be hard when there's those processes around.
Yeah. And what I would say, what I've experienced in the work that I do is helping teams and organizations shape the future culture they want is absolutely, I agree with you. If the CEO and the leadership team, if they aren't on board and they aren't aligned and believe in it, committed to it, emulating it, if they aren't on their own journey as a part of that, then oftentimes it's gonna really struggle. At the same time, the CEO and the senior leadership team alone, as we know, can't shape a culture either. And more, what I'm seeing, I'm interested in kind of your observations around younger generations, because more and more generations are saying, hey, I want to be connected in this culture, and I actually want to be a participant. I want to be I may have come into this as called kind of a passive culture taker, if you will, if to use that language. And I'm here, but I actually want to be a part of the making process. And I want to be connected to that CEO and to the belief in what's happening. But I also want to be a participatory piece of helping us shape that. And so the places where I've seen it be most successful are the ones where, yes, the senior team, the CEO, that everyone is in alignment of what is that culture and how do we articulate that, what we're trying to create together. But then they are absolutely finding those and developing those thermostats and those ambassadors throughout the levels of the organization to do that. Are you seeing the same thing from a generational perspective as well?
So I think so generational. Let me do the culture, and then we can come back to the generation, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So on the culture, I think that we are seeing a lot of times where people want to make a culture change, and so they change the mission statement and the corporate values, and then they think, okay, we're done. It's like, oh my goodness, you're on step number 4 out of 4,000, so keep going.
That's right.
And so I think that's important for people to understand, is that it is hard and it takes a long time. And one of my very favorite examples of it is Microsoft under Satya Nadella, right? He came in and he actually did transform the company because Gates had kind of tried to change it, but he was the founder and that was the culture, right? Ballmer tried to change it unsuccessfully. Nadella comes in, right? And everyone's like, Satya who? But he was, I talked to Ed Schein about this when it was Jack Welch, that why was Jack Welch able to change the culture of GE so quickly, right? And Schein said, why? Is because he was an insider on the sideline, right? He came from GE Plastics, so he understood the culture. Therefore, he knew very quickly how to work within it to change it. And Nadella was very similar, right? He had worked in Microsoft for a long time, so he was very successful at doing it. But what he did was, he listened a lot, he talked to a lot of people, but he spent a lot of time making sure that the right people were on the bus, and then later they were in the right seats, right? And he also got rid of people that at very senior levels who were not kind of walking the talk. And that sent a huge signal throughout the organization, like, ooh, this guy means what he says. So I think there's a whole lot of that going on. So I encourage people to kind of look at what he did. Nadella has a biography out, which is worth reading. So I think he did something very hard, and he changed it in, I think, what's a pretty positive way, and they had amazing results with it as well.
Yeah. So, so for my listeners, there's a couple of things that you're identifying there that's going to be some common language that they're going to hear. One, even when you talked about the style of the way that you teach, but also in what you just heard about coming in to shape a culture and starting by listening. And that conversations, this is the language that we talk a lot about, is conversations are the currency for change. That we begin to listen and we begin to talk about what is it that collectively that we want together, and what does that look like in action and behavior. And that it's not just about one of the steps is certainly being able to articulate it through those core values or those mission statements or that language that's going to help drive the behavior that we want. And so we create this language to help us rally. But it's not about having a great poster on the wall. It's about our posters being in our people, and the process to get there to where we all understand and can wrap our brains around this future thing we're trying to create, but also then begin to emulate and put into practice and begin to live it out. Certainly takes time. And what I heard you talking about is along that journey of development and shaping that proactively, there are going to be people that aren't willing, aren't able, are choosing to actively not be a part of that change. And therefore, what we allow lingers and what we teach triggers. And so what I heard you just say is identifying, okay, there's some behaviors, there's some people, some things that are lingering that are getting in the way of that future we're trying to create. And so we've got to help the system.
Absolutely. And also everybody's watching you. Everybody
That's
is
right.
watching what you do, right? I can't tell you how many times, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, where the CEOs say, we need more collaboration. We need a collaborative culture, these words. And then everybody watches the next person that's promoted is known to have very sharp elbows. Right? It's like, that's not really what they meant.
That's right.
So they are watching that. And if you do that, it really, promotion criteria matters a lot. For that. And the other is, I'll say is, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's, again, for my listeners, that's the cultural dissonance that we talk about on this podcast, where the things we say are not the things that we do. The things that we're saying are not the things that people, feel or experience. And then they say, well, hold on a second. Do we really believe these things? And are we truly committed to this? Or again, is this just a poster on the wall? And so if we want a more collaborative culture, but yet everybody we're promoting is not collaborative, then it creates a dissonance within the culture. It says, well, hold on a second. And now we start to see disengagement and people saying, well, hold on, I can't exactly trust what it is that we're talking about.
Yeah. And people get very cynical. The other thing I think that's really interesting, and you don't hear a lot of people talking about this, I don't think, is, to try to understand who the heroes are in the organization, right?
But before we dive into that topic, let's take a break. Let's pause for a second and we'll be right back. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference, or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon.
There's every organization, there's stories. There's stories about people that everyone knows. Oh, remember the time when Joe did this, or, the founder did this, or something like that, because those stories are passed down because they are transmitting culture. They're telling you what's important. And so one of the things that I oftentimes say, if you want to change your culture, you have to change your heroes, right? The hero is actually, and it doesn't mean you just tell the story. It's that you embody that's actually what you value and promote and talk about, those kinds of things.
The story, so the language, the hero is a vehicle to help us better understand the thinking, acting, and interacting that we're trying to shape. And so those magical heroes that we point out, because it's all about them connecting an idea and bringing it into action. And by doing that, it's telling a story that we want to perpetuate. And I know, it also happens on the opposite side of things.
Yes.
It can wreck a culture by the negative stories that say, well, hold on, I heard this happened. And that is, again, counter to what we say we want.
Absolutely. And the thing is, people are telling these stories because they are meaningful. They're either meaningful in, as you say, the positive way, this is really what we're going for, or, but this is what we really did.
That's right.
People are talking about that, whether you want them to be or not.
So I want to dive back to this emotional intelligence. We'll tip our toe maybe in this idea of trust a little bit, accountability, some of those words that you were using earlier. And my observation is, and I'm be interested to see what what your reaction to this is, years ago we used to talk about the soft skills, right? And they used to, everybody used to talk about, well, once we're done with the real business stuff, then we'll get around to talking about the soft skills. And maybe this is similar to what you're talking about around innovation and creativity and strategy and leadership and all of that. But that's the way that we used to talk about things, is like, these were the soft skills. And what I've been on a crusade to say to people is that in the world, I think this has always been true, but in the world we're in now, for sure, these are the skills. That it's not, and in fact, these are often the ones that are the hardest for people to reorient their ways of operating. That we can teach people oftentimes technical and what was traditionally known as the hard business skills. The soft skills that formerly referred to as, but I will not refer to anymore, I believe these are the things that now you see that organizations are thirsting for, and people are saying, well, hold on, we need to raise our level of emotional intelligence. And really, our effectiveness of leading people and creating authentic cultures and building trust is all within this stuff that we used to say was soft. And yet it's the most difficult thing often to do. Does any of that resonate with you?
Yes, lots of it. Lots of it. Also, I don't use those terms either, because they sound diminutive. They sound, like extra. Oh, wouldn't that be, that's cream on top, right? Yeah. And it's like, no, that's it. And so, I call them interpersonal skills, relationship skills, superpowers, human skills, right? Emotional intelligence, but I never use those words, soft skills, because I think that they're dismissed. Right? And I will tell you, as a former student at MIT Sloan and having run the program there for about 7 years, that every time we would have a reunion where alums would come back, they'd been out for anywhere from 2 to 200 years or something, and they would all come back with the common refrain. They said, wow, I always wanted, more finance, more econ, all of these things. And they said, I wish I'd paid more attention in my organizational behavior class, because that is my life right now, right? Kind of what they were saying is you can learn econ and finance and accounting. That's easy. I put that in air quotes, but it's this other stuff that is really hard because people are complex and they're messy. And, when people talk about your authentic self, and I always say, which one? Which one, right? We are different people in some ways on different days. And, sometimes you're in a good mood and sometimes you're frustrated and sometimes you're, hangry or whatever. We show up a little differently in each of those times, which is why it makes, if you're that way and I'm that way, imagine us working together, right? One of us is up and the other is down, and then we're both up, or, these kinds of things. So, it is the interpersonal skills that make all the difference. You can get away with not having them or not having, them fully developed for a while, right? Early in your career.
I was going to catch you. I was going to say, for a while.
For a while, yeah.
Right.
For a while, actually. And that's what you're measured on. When you're new, can you, does your balance sheet foot, or, can you do this code properly? And so, we get through school a lot on our intelligence, and we get through our early career very oftentimes on our intelligence and our technical and functional skills. But once you start leading people, is where things start to switch, that no longer, it doesn't matter that you're the smartest person in the room. It actually doesn't matter. You kind of hope they're smarter than you.
That's right.
And our job is to continually develop them, bring out their best, so that collectively we all do better. And that's hard. That is really, really hard.
Yeah. And as we've talked a lot on this podcast, for sure, that, there's this different levels of that emotional intelligence. And you mentioned the word empathy. Part of it is, the sides of emotional intelligence. At first, do I even recognize, and am I self-aware enough to know what's happening in me? And can I even come to that conclusion that today I'm feeling hangry? Today I'm feeling sad,
Yeah.
or all the things, the litany of things that you just named. And so the personal competency side of that self-awareness of what is it I know about myself, and what do I know are my real strengths? What do I know are the things that maybe I'm challenged by or trigger me in some ways? What are the things that I know about the situation I'm in? And then the empathy side of it is that social competency side of it, which is then when I'm in a room or I'm on a team or I'm collaborating with a client, a customer, somebody from another department in the organization. What do I know about them? And am I
Mm-hmm.
curious? And do I understand their strengths? Am I able to read the things that maybe become natural to them and the things that maybe don't come as natural to them? And then the self-awareness part of that emotional intelligence is, okay, well, so what do I do about it? What's
Yeah.
the action? What's the response? So as I'm calibrating the thermostat, what temperature then do I choose to set based on reading that information? And so that empathy piece of it is just such a big element of it. And what we keep hearing more and more is that organizations need more of it, that
Yeah.
we've got stuck in that too much of the functional path.
Yeah, I mean, very oftentimes you take the person who is best at whatever that function is and you make them the manager, right? The fact that they're a great accountant has nothing to do with whether they might be a great manager. And so, yes, that is absolutely true. And, what you were talking about with the self-awareness, I think is really true. I oftentimes ask people, well, who knows when you're having a conversation with somebody, who knows that you're mad first? Is it you or is it
Yeah,
somebody else? Right? Because sometimes you can see somebody, having a reaction and realizing, uh-oh, I'm causing that reaction in them. So yes, self-understanding, self-awareness is very important, as is self-management, right? So if I understand that I'm hangry, maybe I should stop and eat something, right?
that's
Before
right.
I go into this meeting with you, right? That is managing myself,
That's the
saying, I
proactive
need it.
response, right?
Exactly. So, or if I'm angry or upset because I just had, a difficult discussion with somebody, can I, calm myself? Can I, maybe it's going for a quick walk around the block so I can just kind of get it out or something, something like that. But also the empathy part, and I think a big part of this is perspective taking, is understanding somebody else's perspective. So if you're having a conversation with somebody, or you're saying, I think we need to do this, and they're resisting, we oftentimes think, oh man, why are they being so hard, right? Can't they just get with the program? And really, a lot of times they're coming from a very different perspective. Maybe we don't
That's right.
understand what this is actually going to take to make it, or that they have something else going on either in their personal or professional life. So people's reactions are because of their perspective. And so if we don't understand that perspective, we don't understand how to help them or what questions to ask. So, and personally, I think it's hard. I think it's hard because, okay, I'm the boss. I know this. I've been through this 25 times, right? We think we know, but we don't, right? Things have changed. Things are a little different. This time is not exactly like the other time. So trying to understand somebody else's perspective is very, very difficult. And it doesn't, by the way, mean that you have to agree with it, but
That's
that
right.
is their perspective. And it will help you understand them.
That's very well said. And what I would say that I observe, and this is why, in organizational settings or leadership development or experiences in a culture where you're trying to help people gain those perspectives, and we're trying to better understand ourselves and others, you start to utilize tools, where, a strengths finder, an Enneagram, a disc, all the great tools that are out there. And the ahas that you see people start to, part of it is what I hear you describing, is it when the light bulb starts to go off, that people recognize, oh, not everybody lives in their head the same way I do. And that,
Right.
and which sounds obvious, but yet the way we operate is, I see it the way I see it, and you see it the way you see it, and we're looking at the same thing. And so these tools
Yeah.
that help us gain that self-awareness of, oh, these things I thought everybody thought this way, but are actually strengths of mine, And I just walked into the room thinking, well, everybody must be thinking the same thing I'm thinking. And the reality is they don't. They see it from a different set of strengths. They see it from a different angle of vision. And so not only from the emotional intelligence of your own self-awareness are they helpful, but then we start to get curious about the other people and saying, wow, how is Margaret different? And what does she bring to the table that I don't? And that's where we start to see gains.
Yeah. And it's funny. I remember, I think it was the first time I ever taught my Managing Yourself to Lead Others class at Harvard. I was walking across campus with my TA, and she was kind of shaking her head saying, this class, like, what are we going to do all class? You know, this case is so open and shut, right? There's an obvious answer. And I said, oh, just wait, right? And the discussion took almost the whole class because there were really big differences in opinions. Exactly what you're talking. And as we were walking back across campus, she said, I had no idea, right? And it was a big eye opener for her, just saying, I hadn't considered that people would have seen it differently. And I said, right, you don't have to agree with them, but now you know more, right? Now you know more about where they're coming from. And to me, it's like that cartoon that probably most of us have seen, where there's two guys standing, you know, kind of facing each other, and there's a figure on the ground, and one of them is shouting 6, and the other one's shouting 9, right? Because the way they're looking at it, one looks like a 6 and the other looks like a 9. So, you know, the whole idea, just because you're right doesn't mean I'm wrong.
Yep.
Right? Because from that vantage point, it looks like a 6 or a 9.
Which I would say that last statement is something that we need in our world right now, let alone lives and organizations, is an ability, no matter where you are in any kind of issue or spectrum of anything, to be able to say, this person must see it differently than I do. And how do I, instead of, other the other person, how is it I begin to get curious about, how do I articulate how I see it? And how do I listen to try to understand a different point of view and talk about an opportunity for all of us every day to grow in that department. You talk also about this gap between our intentions and our actions, which I love that as well. Say a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think you could be talking about two different things. So I'll mention them both quickly.
All right.
One is that there's oftentimes a gap between our intentions and our behaviors. So we judge ourselves by our intentions. I mean to be a great boss, but you or other people judge us by our behaviors. Yes, but you cut me off, you belittle me, right? So we judge ourselves by our intentions. They judge us by our behaviors. And that's why we oftentimes feel misunderstood, because we think we're putting this out there, but that's not really what we're putting out there. And the other is the knowing doing gap. And that's the idea of that we oftentimes know things that we don't do. And I do this all the time in the classroom. I say, raise your hand if you know that you should listen to people. Let them finish their sentence, not cut them off, those kinds of things. And basically everybody raises their hand. And I said, okay, keep it up if you do that all the time. And basically sometimes there's one hand, that's up. And I'm
very
like,
confident.
There you go. Yes. I said, that's the knowing doing gap. We all know that. Or how many of you know that you should treat people with respect? Or, right, you can use all these different ones. And of course we all know these things, but you don't do them. And so you don't get credit for knowing it. You don't get credit for knowing that you should listen to people. You get credit for doing it.
Yep.
And the knowing doing gap is actually a big problem, because we go, oh, emotional intelligence. Yeah. I know I should have empathy. And it's like, yes, but do you? Do you show that empathy to people? Because if you don't get credit for knowing that.
Absolutely. The example I use for the knowing doing gap is, who here knows that they're supposed to floss their teeth? And then you get told that every time you go to the dentist. You've been flossing, and everybody's like gums are bleeding because the night before they decided to floss.
They did it. Yes.
They did it, right? And they say, there's a gap between what I know and then what I do. And that first part, which I think is a great distinction. Thanks for making that, is that, again, back to that self-awareness around, I have great intentions to do something, and yet my behavior shows something else. I'm locked into my head as a example from an organization not too long ago where a leader got feedback, a group that I was working with, that she was, she was always telling her team that she had an open door policy. And so the intention, of course, by that is the door is open, I'm approachable, I'm accessible. She's a wonderful person and a wonderful leader in so many ways. And yet this is just one example of us not being perfect, is that she had this intention, and yet finally she got feedback from her team is, you say this, but when we come to your office, we walk into your door, you're still at your computer, and when we're trying to talk to you, you don't even look up from your computer.
And I had that boss too, actually. Yeah. I know that. Yeah.
And so finally they got, she got some really wonderful, courageous, challenging feedback that we talked through of like, well, there's a great intention behind this. And yet there's a gap between what other people, the temperature that they're experiencing. And so you're saying you want to be this type of leader, but the temperature you're giving off is something quite different.
I love that example because I think it's out there quite a bit, and all these different ones are out there that I actually believe. And when I understood this, the idea of intentions and behavior, it actually gave me a lot more empathy for previous bosses, because I realized, I bet you they had good intentions too. But their behaviors didn't always match. And also, they were learning on me. How do you learn to lead? You learn by doing it and making a lot of mistakes.
That's right. None of us are perfect. No team, organization perfect. Every culture that I've been a part of, even the great ones, the ones that are, man, you can feel it, the living, breathing culture they have. None of them are perfect, of course, because none of us are perfect. I know we're almost at our time, but I do want to get to that generational question, because I think it's interesting to just get other perspectives. What are any trends or things that you're seeing just across generations of challenges and or opportunities that are taking place right now in the workforce?
Yeah, it's interesting because this comes up in almost every program I teach. Oh, those Z's, et cetera. And
every company I go into, it comes up, every single one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I let people go for a while with it. Right. And I say, do you think this is new? And they're like, yeah, this is really different. And I flash up a slide that shows Aristotle, right? Talking about, this new generation, they're lazy, and a different one by Socrates and Plato. Right. And I'm like, we've been saying this forever, right? That we think that we're so different. And there are some differences because, they are the true digital natives.
That's right.
They grew up with this where, not all of us did. And so therefore they think a little differently about that. But the other thing I think too is that generations in the workplace are just another form of diversity, right? So not all Zs are the same, not all millennials are the same, not all boomers are the same, not all women are the same, not all engineers are the same, right? And so I just always feel like we have to know the individual as opposed to thinking of them as a representative of their group, right? And I think that's true with anybody that we work with. Not all blondes are a certain way. Not all brunettes are a certain way. And I'm not making light of the differences. I'm just saying we're just trying to chunk it out in ways that may not always be helpful.
I love it. No, and so a couple of things that I've observed, I'll just say ditto to everything that you just said, is I love that thinking about the diversity side of things is, what I see, that oftentimes younger generations are asking the question of why more, right? And in many cases, it's a good question. And
actually,
yet
it's a great question.
It's a terrific question. And yet oftentimes the response is, well, just, no, just do it. And yet the question of why is really helpful. And so you see that. The other thing, back to the digital native thing. So Andrew Whitworth, who was a guest on my podcast not too long ago, who's a NFL legend, football player, and now, analyst on Amazon's Thursday Night Football. And so he's in and out of all these teams. And we were talking about the different of players and the different generations and ages of players since he's seen over the last 20 years. And one of the things I thought was really astute, the way that he described it, was saying in this digital native world, they have plenty of knowledge and they can go find it. And they actually are adept at going to find. So if you want to talk about how to do something, they can quickly, they're used to YouTubing it and pulling something up and they know how to do it. So they don't need leaders and people to be hovering and telling them what to do. They need people standing beside them and walking with them and having this kind of continuous dialogue about feedback on how we're approaching things. But it's all in that relational element of it, is what he's observed, is it's the walking beside, not the walking in front or the walking behind in them, which I thought was an interesting way to say it.
That's a beautiful way to say it. Right? You can envision it. And I think there's a lot, because we can all learn from each other, right? Just because I've done it this way for the last 20 years doesn't mean there's not a better way or a different way to do it. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, we are at a time. I know you and I could talk about this for a long time, but our listeners might be saying, hey, shut up. Leave us alone. So let's give them that gift. I just want to say again, I'm really appreciative of you being on, and I love the spirit of the work that you're doing. So much of it resonates with me and the work that I'm doing, and certainly for my listeners out there, I know that they saw a lot of connections to the things that you're talking about, that you're teaching, and that you're showing up with in the world. So, Margaret, thanks for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, it's great to be connected. And for those of you listening out there, in the show notes, you'll see some reminders about how you can connect with Margaret and just follow the great work that she's doing. And we'll put that in the show notes. So I hope you're leaving this conversation feeling like you've had a little oxygen breathed into you, that it's given you a time to step back and think about that temperature you're setting in your life and your work. And some of these things at least are going to be resonating with me as I come out of this conversation. But this idea of being self-aware and trying to be curious about what other people might be experiencing, and that maybe they see it from a different angle that I need to stop and think about. And to think about being a change maker often requires that, hey, are we actually all in this, and are we all pulling in the same direction, and is this real? Is there congruence between our actions and our behaviors, or is there dissonance taking place that often gets in the way? And this idea of empathy and building our level of emotional intelligence is not the soft skills, but might just be the skills. And how can we begin and continue to try to bring the best out of each other, even in the times when maybe we disagree on how something is done or approached, but how do we work together to make progress? So I really appreciate Margaret being here. Again, for anybody out there, if you haven't subscribed already, do that. You hit the like button or the 5 stars, leave an authentic review, and make sure that you amplify the messages, share them with the people around you. And lastly, I'll just remind us all that the future of leadership is you, is me, is us. We get to set the temperature that we hope to set, to be culture champions and ambassadors with the people around us, and all of us should play a role in shaping that future that we're going to create. So I'll just remind us to step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.